Magic Winx as a transformation has a special place in the franchise because it is the one that started it all, and it's also the one that most people know because it's been around for the longest, being present for all of season 1 and also season 2 and also a good chunk of season 3. So people have a lot of fond memories regarding this transformation, and I personally am one of those OG truthers who call it Magic Winx and not Charmix, even though Nickelodeon tried to gaslight us into thinking that it's called Charmix. It's not. If you call this Charmix, I genuinely wonder, then what do you call Charmix? Like, is it just a power up to you then? Is it a jewel thing? Like, I like words to have meanings, so I'm going to call it Magic Winx. Something that's amazing about this design is that its simplicity actually serves a purpose, because back in the day, back in ye olden days, when everything was hand-drawn, you actually had to be very resourceful when it comes to details, because you had to draw that over and over and over and over again. So keep things simple, keep things concise, and I think Magic Winx is a masterclass as a transformation when it comes to that idea. And I also, and maybe this is a controversial take, but I do think that season 3's fight scenes are kind of lacking because Enchantix as a transformation was so highly detailed that they just couldn't animate a lot of like crazy movement when it came to the transformation. And season 3, especially when everyone's in their Enchantix, has a lot of animation errors, and I'm not blaming them because I actually think it's quite impressive that they were this ambitious when it came to hand-drawn animation and giving 6 main characters such detailed outfits. But I do think that the Magic Winx designs just make it easier to have more dynamic and interesting fight choreographies. When it comes to the color palette, I really appreciate that everyone is very distinct, something that, for example, the reboot completely failed with Bloom, Tekna, and Aisha being in very similar shades of blue. But here everyone has a very clear color. It's character design 101 basically. Let's start off with everyone's favorite main character, Bloom. So Bloom's color is blue, which is, I think, a very good choice because red would be too obvious. Looking at you, Netflix, putting her in red the entire time. That is, you had one job. You had one job. But here she has a very clear blue and her accent color is yellow. And I think that because of her red hair in combination to the blue outfit, she actually looks more like a flame than if she were to be in all red. Because if you look at an actual flame, you have the blue part in the center and then it grows into like yellow and red. And also the blue part is the hottest part as far as I know. I mean, at least that's what Azula taught me from Avatar. So I think the jewel on her chest is very cute, and I also like how the jewels in their transformations were then later kind of used for their Charmix in some instances. And I also think that her little crown is very cute because it's kind of foreshadowing her like past and her being a princess. Stella's design is interesting because she has the most things going for her, I'd say, because she's the only one who gets a new hairstyle, a completely new hairstyle, which is also a very cute reference to Sailor Moon. I think it's no secret that Winx Club was in fact inspired by Sailor Moon, and Stella's hairstyle is the most obvious connection to that. She's also the only one to get a scepter, and I think her scepter is really iconic. I like the simplicity of it. I think that later iterations of that scepter don't have the same elegance to them. Like, for example, the Nickelodeon scepter just looks off. It looks kind of unnatural in its physicality. I don't know how to describe it. And let's not even talk about the reboot scepter. It looks like a baby rattle, honestly. When it comes to her colors, I think I'm not the first one to say that hers are kind of the inverted version of Bloom's, which is probably highlighting their deep connection as best friends. So you have a very strong focus on orange with light blue accents, and just from a color perspective, this very much works because blue and orange are complementary colors, but also when it comes to Stella as a character, I think that having the light blue accents is a nice nod to her lunar side, which we never actually get to see, but it's fine. I'm over it. Honestly, I'm not over it, but I try to be over it. When it comes to the outfit itself, I think it's very cool that hers looks very summery. Like you have the hot pants and also the very short top that kind of looks like it's just tied around her breast diagonally almost. And that in combination with her high boots, I think works very well, because otherwise if she had like bare legs down to her feet and just small boots, I think that it would be unbalanced, but the high boots balance it out when it comes to the amount of color. And I also think it's funny that her boots are technically underneath her knees, but honestly, if I think about Stella and her boots, in my brain they're just very, very high. So in real life, if I were to wear her boots, I'd feel like they should be over knees. Which just shows how the Winx Club's distorted proportions also make clothes look different just by them having, let's be real, very unhuman anatomy. Our little flower girl Flora, I think, has one of the most elegant designs ever. She basically looks like a flower, but in an abstract way. I think a lot of later Flora transformations are just too literal when it comes to the flower motif, because yeah, you can put her into actual petals and roses and stuff like that, like for example the reboot did. But here you actually have more the idea of a flower. You know what I mean? Her skirt is reminiscent of a flower. It's not actual petals. Same goes for her corset, which kind of looks like a tulip almost, in my opinion. And I think that in her case, in contrast to, for example, Stella, the short boots work very well. If she had very high boots, I think it'd be too overpowering, because she also has these very long arm thingies. And here I think it's good that we can actually see her legs. Her accent color is green, but it's only actually present in her choker and her wings, so her design is very pink. But I don't mind that. I'm very torn on Muse's design, because on the one hand, I think that her top very much communicates her personality when it comes to the one strap situation she's got going on, because it makes her look edgier and cooler, which she is. She is the cool one, I guess. Her little arm thingy with the two strings feels somewhat tacked on to me. It's lacking in intention, but I think it was trying to make the design a little bit more dynamic. I do really love her colors, because she has the darkest color palette out of all of them, but she still manages to stand out and make it her own. Her main red is so fascinating to me, because it's not a pure red. It's very much going into a more pink direction, a very dark reddish pink, which ties it perfectly to her accent color purple. Her accent color being purple, I think, is also interesting, because it connects her somewhat to Darcy, and we all know that their storylines are very much intertwined in the first season, so her having this connection to darkness, I think, works very well. And her headphones are just iconic. I think they're so cute. And also, that's a thing that I feel like the reboot just flipped around for the sake of doing things differently. Like now she's not wearing the headphones when transformed, but when she's not transformed, and I think that does not make any sense. Now let's talk about the most divisive Winx Club design, I'd say, which is Tecna, of course. Her design is very polarizing. Some people love it, some people hate it. I personally am of the opinion that it's very normal for you to not like her design as a child, but then grow a lot of appreciation for it as you get older. And that's why I'm also one of those people who thinks her design is really cool, because it's the most bizarre one, it's the most creative one also in a way, because she has very unique wings. She has those wings that turn into this holographic triangle paper plane type of situation. But I think it's very cool. Even as a child, I really appreciated that part about her. I also really love how her heels kind of mirror the shape of her wings when she's not flying. And I also think that her helmet is really cool, because it makes sense that she has protective gear, because her brain is like the most important aspect of her, so she has to protect it. And also her being in a bodysuit just makes sense, and I like that, for example, in season 2, there's this one scene where she's not sunbathing like the others because she doesn't want to get tan. And Stella confronts her about that, and she's just like, yeah, well, I don't want a tan, so I'm not going to put on a bathing suit. And I feel like her Magic Winx being a bodysuit kind of ties into that character trait. To me, she's just like a basement dweller who just really does not like sun, and I very much relate to that. I also really like the shade of purple they chose, because her color is actually the most pastel out of all of them. And I think that balances out the more extreme parts of her design by giving her a more muted color. Last but not least, let's talk about our favorite aquatic princess, Aisha, or Layla. Let's not get into that now. Her design is probably the most intricate. She has short pants that are layered with a skirt that are then tied to a silver ring that connects her top to her skirt, which then has another silver ring. So there's a lot of things happening. It's very constructed, and that makes hers feel the most dynamic out of all of them, which I guess is fitting considering that she's also the most athletic out of all of them, even though that's just one small facet of her personality. Looking at you, Reboot. I personally also really like her being in green. I think the green matches her very well, and it puts another very strong color into the group, unlike another bluish color. And it also contrasts very well to her powers, which are morphics. I genuinely don't understand why in English she was given the title Fairy of Waves, because what do you mean waves? Waves is physics. Even if they're like made out of water, it's still physics. She's not controlling the physics of it, she's controlling the fluid. Like, I don't understand. And I also think that morphics ties into her character arc as well, because on the one hand she is this very prim and proper princess, or at least she had to be, but she's also this rebel who loves to move and who loves to also kind of like step into danger almost. And this type of flexibility is what represents in her powers of morphics, where she has to literally morph herself into a different person depending on where she is at the moment. I also like that her wings are a little bit spiky. Interestingly, the same wing design was then used for Dark Bloom, which I think is interesting because that shows that the spikes are kind of off-putting in a way. They feel like a defense mechanism. They're trying to communicate, okay, don't get too close to me, which I also think is representative of Aisha as a person, where on the one hand she's deeply lonely and she wishes for companionship with friendship and romance alike, actually. But at the same time she's very defensive, and she struggles with letting people actually get close to her. And that's why I think her design is very well executed, because it communicates all of these things. Looking back, it's not really a surprise why this design stayed for as long as it did, and even to this day the franchise is using it for merchandise and more merchandise and even more merchandise, because it's the most recognizable out of all of them. To all the people who've worked on these designs, I think you can be really, really proud of yourself, because these designs have stood the test of time. And I do think that for anyone who's trying to design a magical girl group, it's very good to look at this very first design of Winx Club, because it is the epitome of using simplicity for your advantage. And with that, I say thank you for listening to my yapping. Bye bye!